Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Gloria Lara, and I am the chair of the Michigan Civil Rights Commission. For those of you that don't know, the Commission is an 8-member body created by the 1963 Michigan Constitution. We are the only commission of this type that is enshrined within the state constitution. We are specifically charged with enforcing the civil rights protections against discrimination that Michigan affords to every resident and visitor. The Commission is responsible for investigating alleged discrimination against any person because of religion, race, including hair texture and protective hairstyles, color, national origin, genetic information, sex, including sexual orientation or gender identity, age, marital status, height, weight, arrest record, and physical and mental disability. In addition to housing, we enforce civil rights laws in relation to employment, education, public accommodation, law enforcement, and public service. Today, we are here to engage in a public hearing on fair housing. We convened this event because the department would like to hear testimony from the public about direct discrimination or disparate outcomes experienced during housing-related transactions. That includes buying a house, renting a house or apartment, credit ratings, home loans, or appraisals. Today is the third of 4 hearings to happen around the state through April 2024. We convened a meeting in Detroit last November and a virtual meeting in February. Another in-person hearing will happen in Grand Rapids on April 28th. Following that will be the 2024 Civil Rights Summit on Housing being held on June 12th in Detroit. The department will use this testimony to create a report of recommendations for addressing the fair housing issues. The testimony gathered at the hearings will also influence the topics of discussion at the Civil Rights Summit this June. In order to get the best recommendations, we would like to hear personal experiences and expert testimony on a variety of issues that can impact fair housing in Michigan. I would also like to acknowledge Commissioner Luke Londo on my left. I will now turn things over to Deputy Director Kim Woolridge to share a few housekeeping rules and the protocol for testimony.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Lara and Commissioner Londo and attendees. A few weeks ago, the department created a flyer and Eventbrite registration form to allow residents to reserve a spot to testify. If you registered via Eventbrite, we already have your name added to our list of people who wish to testify. If you would like to offer testimony but did not register through Eventbrite, you will need to complete a public comment form. Public comment forms can be found at the registration table outside or from one of our MDCR staff. MDCR staff, please raise your hand if you are holding a public comment form. Our staff will be circulating through the room collecting the completed forms. Chair Lara will call on attendees in the order in which we receive their testimony form. Depending on the number of people who wish to testify, the time frame for testimony will be about 5 minutes. When there is 1 minute remaining, the timekeeper will display a yellow sheet of paper and provide a verbal warning. We ask that everyone take this warning seriously and begin to wrap up comments. When your time has expired, the timekeeper will display a red sheet of paper. Please end your testimony when you see the red sheet of paper. Please also be aware that MDCR staff will verbally warn any speakers only once if they use inappropriate, inflammatory, or disrespectful language. If use of that language continues, the speaker will be asked to stop commenting. That completes the public comment protocol. Chair Lara, I turn the meeting back over to you.
Thank you, Deputy Director Woolridge. Please remember that we are here to listen and accept testimony. We are not here for extended discussion or debate, only to listen. We may ask questions to clarify our understanding of the testimony. This event is being recorded, and department staff will review the testimony as evidence toward creating recommendations for improving fair housing in Michigan. This public hearing will end at 7 p.m., so we will take our last testimony a few minutes before that time. Also, as a reminder, we will not be discussing individual cases tonight. If you have a question about a current or pending investigation, I will ask you to stop to protect the integrity of the department's investigation. We have MDCR staff out in the lobby that can answer general questions about the department. With that, we will call the first person. I'd like to call Rebecca Borka.
Good afternoon. My name is Rebecca Borka, and I'm here to explain to you some of the things that I have went through in renting an apartment with a disability. I'm visually impaired, classified legally blind. As you can see, I have a leader dog that I travel with. Back in September of 2018, I went to move into an apartment complex. And before I did, I spoke with a leasing agent. I explained my situation, that I was visually impaired, legally blind, and that I had a service dog, and asked if there were any accommodations that I needed to have for my dog. She said all I had to do was fill out an accommodation form, and I'd have to have a doctor fill it out. So I gave her the phone number and address and the fax number of my optometrist. The day I went to go fill out my final paperwork for my dog and to see the apartment, I was told in a very abrupt way that they didn't have my paperwork. And she told me that if I didn't have my paperwork and she didn't have it, I had 15 minutes to take and go and give her a name of another doctor so the doctor could fill out the paper, fax it back, or I would be asked to leave the property because they didn't know if my dog was an actual verified service animal. After that was taken care of, I went and come back the following month. I signed my lease. At that time, I explained that I had complete knee replacements in both of my knees, that my doctor didn't want me walking up several flights of stairs too many times a day, and that I had purchased my own portable washer and dryer for my clothing. An accommodation form was filled out, I signed it, and everything was good, until 2.5 months that I resided into the apartment and got a phone call from my leasing agent telling me that the property manager wanted to come over and look at my washer and dryer. At that time, I asked why. It was just a washer and a dryer. She said, well, don't worry, honey. She said, he just wants to come and look. So I said, okay. When he came into the apartment, I showed him where I was storing my washer. He asked me to pull it out of the closet and put it up to the sink. When I did that, he proceeded to take and raise his open hand. He slammed it on the top of my washer, And he said, well, I'm sorry. This is not an accommodation that we provide here at this apartment complex. And I said, well, I don't understand what you're talking about because I already signed the paperwork. I was told I could have it here. And he said, well, I don't know who told you that, but he said, I'm letting you know right now that you probably won't be able to keep it. At that time, I went and did my own research. I called HUD in Chicago. I spoke with a very nice lady by the name of Mary. Mary told me, Becky, please, when are you going to file a complaint? They can't talk to you that way. They can't treat your dog that way. For 2.5 months, I sat in my living room at the end of each day because I didn't know where to take my dog out to relieve herself. And eventually, through fair housing, I did file a complaint, and the situation was resolved. And then, again, I had issues with my parking spot. In the first case that was resolved by the Fair Housing Center, I received a reserved parking spot, which I didn't know was only in name only, that anybody could park there. So I filed another complaint, and since that time, it has now been resolved again because I received, through negotiations and the attorney that handled the case, a regular reserved /handicap parking space. And along with those negotiations, a letter was sent out by the property manager stating what these special parking spots are for. And that if any one of the residents in my section of the complex, if their friends or family were caught parking in my parking spot, that is due cause for eviction because you're inhibiting a person with a disability to be independent and you're causing a dangerous situation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer. No?
Thank you.
Thank you.
I next call on Stephen Shelton.
Good afternoon, and thank you for the opportunity to speak here today. My name is Stephen Shelton. I am a staff attorney for Legal Services of Eastern Michigan. I work in the Fair Housing Center, where primarily my work consists of civil rights enforcement, fair housing enforcement. We do testing, we do investigation, we do litigation, and we also do education and training. We cover 14 counties. Please don't ask me to name which ones they are, because I know I'll forget one and somebody will be upset. As you might imagine, during the course of this work, we do find lots of different kinds of fair housing violations. They tend to fall, for the most part, into 3 categories. We have exactly what you would expect: intentional violations that arise from bigotry. We have what I call violations of callousness, where a greedy landlord cares only about money and not in the slightest, gives no concern whatsoever about the health and well-being of their tenants. And violations that arise from landlords who seem to have adopted oppositional defiance disorder as a business plan and have basically said, nobody's going to tell me how to run my business, so if you try to tell me, I'm going to go out of my way to do the opposite of what you want. When we encounter these kinds of discrimination, we take them to court, or we file a complaint with HUD or MDCR, depending on which seems more appropriate. But there are also other kinds of fair housing violations that are not intentional, and in fact, they may arise from a result or from a desire to do good, but that nonetheless harm vulnerable populations. For instance, we just conducted a systemic investigation of homeless shelters in Genesee and Saginaw counties. 50% of the tests that we conducted found discrimination against people with disabilities. Now, it's not my belief that in a single one of these cases, there was a desire to single out a group or an individual and say, we don't want your kind. On the contrary, I believe that these shelters, which all have very laudable goals, they clearly operate out of a place of wanting to do good, sometimes just assume that they are not equipped to deal with people with disabilities. The problem is when they do that, they put themselves in the position of making that decision for the person instead of allowing the person with the disability to decide for themselves whether or not that could be accommodated. But just for example, the two biggest discrimination areas that we found in terms of disability were discrimination against people in wheelchairs and discrimination against people who had service animals or emotional support animals. We contacted the shelters where we found violations. And the information we got from them seemed basically to be the same. Wheelchair-related issues tended to relate to buildings with stairs, and the organizations in large part just assumed a person with a wheelchair couldn't go up and down their stairs. Service animal-related issues and emotional support animal-related issues, without exception, related to a fear, or at least that's what we were told, that someone there might have an allergy. Of course, blanket policies such as we don't accept people using wheelchairs or no animals of any kind are allowed for any reason clearly do not conform with the law. They don't provide for any kind of individualized assessment of the individual circumstances. For instance, a person in a wheelchair may be able to walk short distances. They may be able to climb stairs with help. Different species of animals and even different breeds within the same species can present different levels of risk when it comes to allergies. For instance, if you're a dog person, poodles and Wheaten Terriers, great for people who have allergies. They rarely produce an allergic reaction. Siberian Huskies, on the other hand, will sometimes trigger allergic reaction among people who don't normally have an allergy. I'm a cat guy. Siamese cats, very safe for people with allergies typically. My favorite cats, however, of which I have one, the Maine Coon, is on the opposite end of that spectrum. They are known to aggravate allergies, which might be why I'm coughing a bit today. Pot-bellied pigs are becoming very popular service animals. There are, as far as I can tell, and I did a little research on this, no documented cases of anyone having an allergic reaction to a pot-bellied pig. So fear of potential allergies is not a legitimate basis for creating a no animals at all for any reason kind of ban. It denies people with service animals or ESAs access to these shelters, even if the particular animal in question is unlikely to produce any kind of allergic reaction among the people there. More to the point, the shelters themselves could not substantiate that there was a rational basis for this. When I spoke with representatives from each of the shelters, and they said they do not allow animals because of allergies, I asked how many people there have animal allergies. Every single one of them said, I don't know. The bottom line is that people with disabilities are being turned away because of their disabilities. They weren't being turned away because of an inability to make any kind of reasonable modification or accommodation. In fact, they never even reached the question, right? They were preemptively telling people, we're not going to make an accommodation for you, we're not going to make a modification for you because you have a disability and we don't think that we can accommodate that, but we're not going to ask you if we can. Now, unlike cases where we have a greedy or callous landlord or we have someone who is engaged in bigotry, we try to avoid going the litigation route if we can with these folks. Instead, we send them letters. We offer to assist them in being more in compliance with the law. And Legal Services is currently working with a number of these organizations so we can develop policies and procedures that are more compliant with the law and more fair to people with disabilities. We're helping them to train their staff, and we're going to retest them later to see if they're in compliance. And if we find that there are consistent problems, we will probably still pursue action. But I don't think that'll be necessary. These organizations exist to help people, and they're taking that goal seriously. What struck me, though, was during our initial conversations with these organizations, they all asked me the same basic question. How do I know if a person in a wheelchair can handle our stairs? How do I know if someone has an animal allergy? The answer was the most simple, basic, most obvious answer of all. Ask them. I'm not saying that shelters or private landlords or anyone else providing housing should start asking people about their disabilities, but they do need to ask on intake, is there something we can do to help you? And let the individual tell them what they need. I see my time is up, so thank you very much. I appreciate it. If you have questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Mr. Shelton, refresh my memory. Say you are a homeless shelter provider and you operate on the second floor of a building. Somebody comes in with a wheelchair with severe motility issues and is unable to get up the stairs on their own or unable to get up the stairs with support. What is the expectation of the service provider in a situation like that?
In those circumstances, we would expect that they would tell the potential, I guess client would be the right word. They would ask the potential, they would tell the potential client, we have some stairs. Do you need any kind of help with these stairs? Is there something that we can do to help you with them? Because the person may very well say, no, I can climb stairs. I just have a wheelchair because I'm not going to walk any marathons, but I can climb stairs and go downstairs if it's a short distance, that sort of a thing. Or they may say, no, I'm completely bound to this wheelchair. I'd have to have somebody help me, either help carry me up or help support me while I was on my way. And the shelter may say, well, we don't have anybody that's available to do that. Because again, just like any other request for an accommodation, it has to be reasonable and it can't create an undue burden on the provider.
Thank you.
So just to clarify, these shelters are unilaterally just saying, no, you can't.
I'm sorry, I was at a concert last night and I was in the front row and I was an idiot and didn't wear any kind of earplugs, so I'm hearing about half of what you're saying. I apologize.
So to clarify, these shelters are just making that decision without even asking the potential client or resident if they can use stairs.
Yeah, by making, if I'm understanding what you're saying correctly, the problem is that the shelters, in making these blanket policies, are preemptively denying accommodation modification requests before they're even made.
Right. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So next on the list is Olivia Sanchez. Is Olivia Sanchez here? Okay, if she comes in later, then, we will accommodate her. Next is Latricia Powell. Latricia Powell. So next is Patricia Baird.
Yes, good afternoon. I am Patricia Baird, it's B-A-I-R-D, and I'm the director of the Fair Housing Program in Flint here, and we have a jurisdiction of the 14-county jurisdiction. I did testify in the first hearing that you had, and one thing that I didn't mention, and it's going to be just a very quick presentation to you, is I do many of the fair housing impediment studies or analysis of impediments. Who knows what they're going to call it next week, but you know which studies I'm talking about. I've conducted a number of those. I did the one in Genesee County, and one of my biggest concerns about the impediment studies is the zoning ordinance and master plans. And with the zoning ordinance and master plans, I discovered when I did the analysis for Genesee County, just as an example, not picking on them, 33 counties, I'd go to some places and they didn't even know where their zoning ordinance was. They didn't know where their master plan. Somebody would say, what is that called? And that type of thing. The other concern I have that many of them that I analyzed had things in there that needed to be updated. For example, I just did one recently, and I'm not going to mention the municipality. It wasn't in Genesee County, because we have a good working relationship with them. They are trying to do things better in their community. And first of all, this one, as many of them in Genesee County, they're 26 years old, 36, they're way, way outdated. And so I'm hoping with what we can do is possibly give them words of encouragement or incentives to start updating these. In addition to that, I noticed that I reviewed the same individual's master plan. And in the master plan that they just renewed, and they were going to publish it in about 3 weeks, so they wanted me to review it. In that particular master plan, it actually said in there that this one zoning area, and it was near the riverfront, that particular zoning area could not be used for any low-income or subsidized housing. They had that right in their master plan. And I'm thinking, okay, we need to revisit this statement here. You know, we all know that things like that go on, but when we have a community that's actually putting something together, where's their mindset? How are they really thinking? And so there's that type of thing that I just wanted to bring to the commissioner's attention, which I'm sure you're all aware of these types of things. But if we could do something and support them in some way, even finding more monies for even the fair housing centers or other professionals to go in there to do some more analysis and give recommendations, anything we can do to update these master plans and zoning areas, I would appreciate it. And you know what? Many of the people that are working for those governmental agencies, they appreciate our help. They might not like the fact that I do the impediment studies and said, look at the racism here, look at this, look at that. I had one that looked at their study, and 5 minutes later, after we talked for a little bit, they took this and handed it to the other person, here, go put it on the shelf. And I can guarantee you they never looked at it again. So they hired another person the next 5-year rounds, and by golly, if that person didn't say the same thing that I did. And so now we are working with them a little bit. I do have the luxury of building relationships because I've been doing this for 26 years now. And so people know me, and so the trust is there, but I would like even more support from the commission and to help me do my job better and help to change the ways of the community. Thank you. Do you have any questions?
Yeah, Ms. Baird, have you spoken to anybody at the MML? And the reason that I bring that up is I'm also a local elected official in a small municipality outside Detroit, and we recognized last year that our zoning ordinances were a bit out of compliance with state law, and we went through and basically massacred half of our zoning statutes to make sure that it was back in compliance with state law. And I know there's a lot of surrounding communities that just didn't have that awareness or weren't working with a consulting firm who provided that as a service of auditing. You know, for us as a body, it's a bit of a challenge and a bit of mission creep to go out and provide that service to municipalities. But the MML, I mean, that's functionally what they exist to do. And I really would, if you have not already, would encourage you to reach out directly to them, because that's something that they'd be able to provide to as part of their regular newsletters or their bi-monthly magazine to their members, and just say, hey, when's the last time you audited your zoning, and then provide, either your contact information, or if there's like a central state authority that deals with those types of matters, to provide that service so that we aren't running into this issue again.
Yes, I'm not familiar with that particular agency. I've never worked with them before, but I always like to develop partnerships, so I will contact them, and then I'm always open to do presentations or support with anybody.
Awesome.
Because we're all here for the common goal, to change the ways of the community and make them better.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thank you.
Next, I'd like to call Elenia Christian, and please correct my pronunciation if I didn't do it properly.
Hello, my name is Ilana Christian, and I am an attorney at Farm Worker Legal Services, Michigan. We are a statewide service, and we support farm workers all over Michigan in a variety of their needs, including employment and housing. Part of our job is to do outreach in the farm worker community across Michigan, and some of the problems we've seen in housing include, one, a lot of farm workers work in employer-owned and controlled housing. They often, the housing they live in often does not have sufficient heating mechanisms, so farm workers who are working in the early spring, winter, and fall often come home to houses that are not warm after working all day. They also do not have We have also seen reports and have had clients who have reported not having safe drinking water, as well as water that does not heat up. And again, something that is really important to contextualize in the farm worker community is, one, the community is primarily Latinx, Two, they work in a very intensive job. They are often more likely to have chronic conditions such as heart conditions, diabetes, chronic pain. And there a significant number of farm workers cannot speak English. So this makes reporting their housing issues extremely difficult. And that's also compounded by the fact that they live in housing that is owned and controlled by their employer. So when they do try to report housing issues, such as having poor water, poor heating, or even mold, they often do not see improvement to their situation, but also they fear complaining to either an authority or to their employer because their employment is at risk. This is even more severe to a significant number of farm workers whose employment is connected to their immigration status. And we're seeing now with the growth of the use of the H-2A program, we see that the agricultural industry is moving to barrack-style housing. So we have a number of farm workers who work with a group of people, and that they go home and they live in overcrowded housing. Often you have 4, 5, maybe even 10 people to a room in beds. In addition, I really want to focus on the fact that they have water, they don't have access, a lot of our farm workers we see do not have access to clean water or heating. As we know that your living situation can heavily impact your health, and when you have a population that is especially vulnerable to chronic conditions, and they come home and they are unable to have clean water, they are unable to properly clean their clothes as they're exposed to pesticides all day. They have limited access to laundry and bathroom facilities. This puts their health at risk. And again, when you can't speak English or your landlord is your employer, that makes reporting extremely difficult. One of our clients reported having black mold holes in the floor and running water that was undrinkable. It looked brown whenever they opened the tap. Another client reported that her and her family had holes in their walls and floor, and they had no working heat in the autumn season. And I want to emphasize that this farm worker had a family. She has 5 children, and this is the case for many farm workers across Michigan. Poor housing conditions reduce the ability of farm workers to engage in health-promoting behaviors, such as pesticide safety behaviors, physical activity, and rest. Research with farm worker populations indicate that overcrowded, poorly ventilated, and unhygienic living conditions are associated with respiratory and dermatology conditions, as well as increased stress. One migrant housing camp that we visited, farm workers reported having physical reactions to, such as, having rashes as a result of the poor water quality in their housing. And even though that state and federal requirements have water testing and certain requirements around heating, a lot of these requirements are not met. And a pattern we're seeing with the farm worker landscape is that contracts are becoming longer. Instead of workers typically working a season, say a blueberry season, that would be 3 months, and then they would later move to another crop, that would be another 3 months. You see an increase of contracts that are now becoming 8 to 10 months long. And that is, as we all know, Michigan weather can vary very greatly throughout the year. And when they don't have clean water, they don't have hot water, thank you, they don't have proper heating, and they're unable to report to either a government agency or to their employer regarding their conditions. This puts their health at risk and also their safety. And all of these factors are again compounded by the fact that we're seeing an increased number of domestic U.S. workers being displaced in favor of use of the H-2A program. And so the lack of reliable, affordable, temporary, and permanent housing options for farm workers continue to be a significant concern for migrant and seasonal workers who wish to leave their employer-controlled housing and settle in Michigan. And regardless of whether workers are migrant, seasonal, immigrant, non-immigrant, or U.S. citizens, farm workers across Michigan lack suitable and affordable housing options that are also not safe. So thank you for the opportunity to present our work and experience with the farm worker community in Michigan, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. I do have a question regarding language.
Yes.
The non-English speaking farm workers, what other languages besides Spanish do you find?
So we're seeing an increased number of Haitian Creole speaking populations around Michigan. While primarily we work with clients that their first language is Spanish, in the past few years, more and more workers from Haiti who speak Creole are coming in. We also, even within the Spanish-speaking community, you may have different forms of Spanish or different dialects, which can sometimes be a hindrance, but usually it's Spanish-speaking.
Thank you.
What is the incentive in a 8 to 10 month contract? I grew up in the Upper Peninsula where summer lasts for like 2 weeks and blueberry season's about 2 weeks. So you have somebody come for, a lot of places, you get like 2 to 3 good months of blueberry picking and then you're done. What's the incentive of an 8 to 10 month contract, and what are you finding that those workers are doing besides what you would expect?
So in the contract, it's a very complicated process, so I'm trying to shorten it as much as possible. But these contracts, while previously we saw just one employer within these contracts, these employers also, I guess you can say, lease or kind of contract their laborers out to other employers in the area.
Really?
In the area, yes. So oftentimes you may have a contract that is listed under one employer or one recruiting agency, and you have multiple locations with different tasks, and sometimes these tasks have different employers, all under the same contract.
It's a very creative manipulation of the H-2A program.
So basically, what you're saying is you have an agency that brings in and gets the H-2A employees, and then they just have contracts with different other employers. So there's an agency that's really that doesn't have the actual work, but then they subcontract their workers out to
Not
employers.
necessarily. So
Okay.
sometimes we have because the H-2A process is complicated, oftentimes employers rely on third parties, such as recruiters, to form their contracts for them. So it's not that, I don't want to say this all the time because, as we know, labor trafficking is rampant. A lot of times when I'm saying that there are different employers that are listed in the contract, they are all listed. That happen, but that is not to say that that farm workers are not trafficked. We do see situations where farm workers are told your employment is up, but you got an extension. No extension has been given. The farm workers don't know, and they're transported to another facility. And to kind of bring this back to housing, you see, the overcrowding, the poor sanitation facilities, lack of bathrooms. And again, their movement is still controlled by their employer. They often are not allowed to leave their housing on their own after work hours.
So what you're saying also, if I can understand, is that there could be a long 8 to 10 month contract, but an employee within that 8 to 10 months could be moving around to different housing.
No, not necessarily. They
So
could be in the
there's-
same housing, but they are working in different
I
locations.
see.
Sometimes they are contracted with other people where they work
Mhm.
for them as well. As long as it's listed in the contract, it's not labor trafficking. But something I do want to add to make sure that this is a very complicated group of people to work with, is that you have, as you're seeing like bigger and bigger agricultural companies who cover a lot of different crops or have different needs, you often see them, their employment is moved based on what the season requires. So it can be working on irrigation systems, and then they're moved to planting, and then they're moved to a greenhouse that the owner happens to have. And again, I think this speaks a lot to the control the employer has over the farm workers' movement and also their housing. And that speaks to a lot of the fear of reporting and the amount of control agriculture employers have over their workers who live in employer-owned housing.
Thank you. Oh,
Yeah, of course.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a question.
Can you identify yourself for?
Oh, I'm sorry, Lamont Satcher. I'm a general counsel for the Department of Civil Rights. I had a question with respect to some of the testimony you gave. It seems that a number of the issues that you pointed out,
Mhm.
that conditions that the seasonal workers suffer in terms of their housing are subject to or violations of various codes, whether it's a health code, some safety code, housing code.
Mhm.
And I'm interested to know, is it your testimony or understanding that those governmental entities that police those codes are complicit in the conditions that are existing in the housing that the seasonal workers are living in? Because I assume at some point someone has to come and do an inspection, whether it's monthly or yearly or something. So what happens when that happens?
No, that's not what I'm saying. I do not, that was not my intention to say that government agencies are complicit at all. I think I'm going to speak to more of the patterns that we see in Michigan. Farm workers we see about 70,000 farm workers a year statewide. Sometimes they're in locations like Flint or Detroit, and sometimes they're in rural areas. And of course, there are inspections that are required. However, a lot of housing that farm workers live in are unlicensed. It could be because capacity, it could also be just housing has changed. You also have a lot of housing is also in very remote regions, which can make it difficult to consistently go and get to inspect them. But in addition, something I do want to mention is that throughout the seasons, water quality changes, especially when in the winter season, where there's not as much use of pesticide, you might not see pesticide present in the water, for example. But as the season starts, you'll start to see, and the overcrowding happens with the limited access to bathrooms and everything. That's where you see the contamination happening. And that could also just be how it can be reflective of how seasons can change our environment. And I do want to hit on that. We are in regular contact with agencies who do this testing, and they do inspect housing, and they do they do their best. It's just the farm worker population is invisible. There's a large number, and there are a lot of barriers to see every single housing facility they have. I hope that answers your question.
No, thank you very much. It does.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thank you so much.
Next, I'd like to call Vanita Reed. Is Vanita Reed here? All right, next is Madison Wortham II. Reginald Bond Jr. Percy Glover.
Good afternoon. Sorry about that for sitting in the back. So I want to share a few different things. I want to first talk about my 70-plus-year-old mom who struggled with a few aspects of her apartment complex. So she had multiple pests. She had carpet beetles, sewer flies, as well as bed bugs. And in my mind, I think as an elderly person, for a renter, that service should be required to be handled by the leasing office. So that's the first thing. Also, next thing is, as a formerly incarcerated person who did 11 years, 6 months, and 4 days in prison, I understand the economic struggles for people with jail and prison experience having the most difficult time finding residence. As in the more today, excuse me, in the most traditional way, as an employee of the Genesee County Sheriff's Office, I still see it every day. As people exit the jail, still having that struggle because of they were in jail for an extended time and maybe found not guilty. Now they're back in the community, struggling financially, can't get ahead, scrambling to find work, et cetera, or unfortunately was convicted and now back in the community and struggling, obviously, with finding residence because now I'm a convicted felon, and because of that discrimination as a convicted felon, I can't find an apartment. I'm not in a place where I can afford to go purchase a home, so I'm struggling, which also plays heavily into this term that I absolutely hate, mass incarceration, that creates a revolving door of return because people cannot find basic life needs or fulfill basic life needs in the most successful way. So I'm gonna just stop there and give you that really short version and ask if there are any questions.
You know, unfortunately, this issue has been brought up before, so and thank you for bringing this up, because I know that returning citizens have been told that they have issues with trying to find housing. You've expanded on that a bit more, which, thank you.
And I think probably the biggest concern is for those people who have been back in the community for an extended amount of time. I can see maybe those early issues and concerns as a person transitions back to the community just behaviorally, but 5, 10, 15, 20 plus years, people should not be still struggling, especially if they have been free of crime and that lifestyle that sent them to jail or prison. So.
I don't really have this much knowledge on this whole particular area, but are there like halfway houses for people that when they get out, or are they just generally just left?
So there are transitional houses and halfway houses, even here locally in Flint and Genesee County. Those are buffers, cushions for somebody exiting prison that gives them a short time, most times 90 days, to give them, again, some cushion to kind of get on their feet. But again, obviously, as you stated, this has been a problematic issue for last forever. You know, I can throw some numbers out there as relates to years, but it's been a problem for forever.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Next, I'd like to call on Bethany Hazard.
I live in Flint, and we just have had excessive tax hikes, which will push people like me out of my home. I live around abandoned houses in Blight. It was not that long ago that I bought a house in a working class area. My area was supposed to be residential, but city planners overlook areas they do not deem worthy. block from my house is a liquor store opened, even when there were ejections. I now have 5 liquor stores surround me in a 1-mile area. All these places sell single cigarettes and things to do drugs to take children to the streets. Used tire shops were allowed to open up, and they threw tires in abandoned homes and garages and piled them in vacant schools. For years, I tried to fight to close the illegal gambling place down, and I have called the state more than once. For what city planners allowed brought in crime and flight and sued out of my neighborhood. Now where families live, there are vacant homes and rentals. During the water crisis, I had to pay for 2 water heaters. I had to redo all the pipes in my bathroom because they started leaking between the walls. I had to replace my tub because the gritty sediment coming into my home scratched the porcelain and it started to rust. This drained my savings along with medical bills. This puts me in a bind to do home repairs in an effort to privatize water. The people of Flint have the highest water rates in the nation. In the past, I put in flower beds and watered my grass, which I can no longer afford to do. House and car insurance is very expensive in Flint. I'm on a fixed income, and I still have to buy food, medical, and consumers. I've done everything in my power to stay in my home. I cut off cable, I don't buy new clothes, and I do not own a smartphone. Now Christmas presents are me making cookies for my family. Because of what the city allowed in my area, I installed an alarm, which is my luxury. Most businesses in Flint are for profit and 501c, which do not pay tax. The people have no say in important matters here. The city gave ARPA funds to private businesses, along with a 70% tax abatement, and are taxing us to pay for a private company. Moreover, they gave the highest bidder for the trash contract that will raise our special assessment fees. I was hoping ARPA dollars would touch the people, but it said it touched special interests. A small example of what I see is ARPA dollars were given to a church for a Halloween party, which violates separation of church and state. A park that already got $9K in federal funds was given more in ARPA dollars. I feel these tax hikes are excessive and will drive people like me out of my home. A better solution is to not make every business a 501c so they can skirt taxes. The ARPA document said that cities should try to get their own assets back, and the reason they gave was that that was the way city could survive. This has not been done at all. The first blow to the people was to inundate my areas with crime and blight, and the second are these large tax hikes. I am begging for the Civil Rights Commission to look into these matters, as I'd like to stay in my home.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next would be Lonzetta Massey. Lonzetta Massey. Diane Scott. Diane Scott. Monique Silva.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for allowing me these moments to address you all this afternoon. My name is Monique Lamar Sylvia. I'm a city councilwoman in the city of Saginaw. So it's kind of a twofold why I'm here. So first, I'm gonna try to speak for the people of Saginaw that have made several complaints to me. And sometimes people think that the city council we can work miracles. So I'm here representing them, and I'm also here representing myself, and I'll put them first. Thank you. First of all, I've had several complaints, and my complaint, also with the complaints that I am addressing today and sharing with you, are in regards to the Saginaw Housing Commission. Several complaints I've had from them, and especially from handicapped persons and senior citizens. They have been being bullied and evicted from their place of residence, or threatened to be evicted if they made complaints or if they took their complaints too far. I have seen photos, and I have known people personally. They have spoken with me in regards to bed bugs, ceilings coming down, water coming down, mold, flowers they call it, in the restroom, just horrible conditions. And they are getting paid a lot of times by the state of Michigan or federal dollars in regards to these high rises and different apartments. So that is definitely a concern, and especially when people are being bullied or threatened not to make complaints. People have had to throw away their furniture because of bed bugs. At one time, the bed bugs were so bad at several of the high rises that are overseen by Saginaw Housing Commission that persons that wanted to visit could not visit. They had to visit outside or go no further than the entrance because the bed bugs were so horrible. And they were forced to throw away some of their furniture, and the Housing Commission did not replace their furniture or try to get any reasonable, let me think of the word, something to get them their furniture back. I'm just lost for words for a moment. So myself personally, mostly what I have to talk about is reasonable accommodations. I am a person with disabilities. You cannot just always see what my disabilities are, but they are, and they have been documented by my doctors, etc. It started about 4 years ago, where I started being actually bullied by Saginaw Housing Commission. I was told I was overhoused because it's myself, my child, and a live-in aid, if you're familiar with that. And I was told and was being forced to get rid of my live-in aid and have my daughter be my live-in aid. First of all, you cannot tell me who my live-in aid could be. And that particular, my child that lived with me had issues of their own. And whether they did or not, I had my choice of who I wanted my live-in aid to be. And I was harassed and harassed until I also used the services of legal aid, and they helped me in regards to that particular situation. But sometimes you find out when a person loses, I'll use that word, or the outcome is not in their liking, you get a lot. And I've experienced a lot of little letters in the mail, all kind of different stuff. And, excuse me. And so this went on, and I was allowed to stay in that particular unit, but, you know, it wasn't very comfortable. I always wondered, you know, I had to do these every year, and as I looked at these, you don't have to fill out reasonable accommodation every year when you know that this person has a handicap and need this particular service. So I'll go down, and I'm trying to rush, I'll go down to very recently. My live-in aid was living partly with me and partly in their own place. So they were saying that, you know, you couldn't do that, et cetera, and that's fine. So I sent in another reasonable accommodation. At this particular time, this reasonable accommodation was sent back, and they told me it didn't have a fax number. Everyone doesn't have a fax machine. So I sent that back in. It was sent back again about a month later with no reason or no explanation whatsoever. When Legal Services of Eastern Michigan became my support system, they told me to send in another one. So I sent that one in. And from that date to this one, even with the attorneys from Legal Services of Eastern Michigan, they have not given a reason why they did not send in those reasonable accommodations. I'm being forced to move into another location, to another side of town, and it's just ridiculous. It is really horrible. It is really horrible for me. And so that is all I have to say at this particular time. And if you have any questions of me, I'm available.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Have a great day.
Too.
Next, I'd like to call on Sharice Stapleton.
I do apologize for sitting in the back too.
Don't
That's
worry about
fine.
Thank
Get
you.
your exercise.
Oh, yeah, it did. It was nice, right? Thank you. Well, I stand before you today as a person with lived experience. In 2015, I had to be in a shelter, right? And we were there for a certain amount of time. I'm giving you a backstory so you can understand where I'm coming from. We moved out of, and this was during the water crisis when it first started. So those who were considered to be homeless literally were moved out to other counties. So we were moved out to another area. Long story short, in 2022, being lived somewhere for over 7 years, the apartment complex was bought out by another company. During that time, it was just me and my last child, right? When I first came here, I had my other children, so I had a bigger apartment. They went up $300 on our rent, and it put us in a place to where our voucher no longer was able to be accommodated. I tell you this because they did not give us an opportunity for another apartment. They just told us that we had to leave. In the position that I'm in now, if I would not have had a certain amount of income, we wouldn't have been able to, we would have been back in a shelter. That's what I want you to understand. So I run a nonprofit that provides parent education now because of that situation. I'm dealing with parents who have been incarcerated, who are coming out, who receive vouchers, and who are not able to utilize those vouchers because of the felonies that they have, right? So that is one of the reasons why I'm speaking to you today. It's hard when you're providing a service for people and you can't give them a help with an outcome. I'll stop right there. Do you have any questions for me?
I'm just looking at your form with your background information and contact information.
Yep. Mothers of Joy Institute for Parenting and Family Wellness, where we provide what's called a trauma-informed approach for parenting, and we help parents to parent well. And how you parent well is having safe, affordable housing. How you parent well is being able to have a neighborhood where there are conducive things to be able to eat, not having to go to Dollar General, Family Dollar for your food. Having a grocery store within a 5 to 10 mile radius would be nice. And where I live and where I work, that is not available. And how can you be healthy? How can you help your children be healthy if you don't have this available, right? So that's what I have for you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Jaime. Please correct my pronunciation.
It is Ryan Jaime, thank you. I work for Disability Network of Mid-Michigan. We cover 12 counties: Alcona, Aranac, Bay, Clare, Gladwin, Gratiot, Iosco, Isabella, Midland, Ogama, Saginaw, and Roscommon counties. That was impressive. I usually can't do it all in one go.
I know.
I focus on community education and community outreach, but I've been lucky enough to work one-on-one with individuals who utilize our services. We are a center for independent living, so we provide free services for people with disabilities, and all they have to do is self-identify with a disability. We don't require paperwork or doctor's notes or anything like that. Sorry, I'm nervous. Some of the things that I wanted to talk about today, first starting with service animals. In the state of Michigan, you do not have to have paperwork that says that my dog is a service animal. They just have to be trained to your needs and your accommodations. And a lot of the times this comes from, companies that are taking the time and the money to train dogs that are donated. And these are typically larger dogs like golden retrievers and labs. Sometimes other breeds, so I'm not saying that it's just those, but there are more. You can have a pony for a service animal. You can have a cat for an emotional support animal. There are all sorts of, things to do with that. But what I want to hit on is housing complexes saying that you cannot have an animal over 50 pounds. There are allergies. We have shelters in our area that say they cannot accommodate a service animal, so you cannot stay here. And then a member of our staff will have to go pick that person up and take them to a different shelter. We have shelters that utilize stairs, and a lot of them, which a person with a wheelchair, a walker, a cane, other sorts of mobility devices or mobility issues cannot stay there. We have, one of the other things I wanted to talk about was people with disability often utilize low-income housing. They often utilize Section 8 vouchers. When sometimes these apartments or high-rises, they aren't accessible. We might have a step into the bathroom. We might not have grab bars in bathrooms. We might have light switches that are a couple inches too high for an individual who uses a wheelchair. So, yeah, so that's pretty much all I wanted to hit on. I'm sure there was more, but I can't remember. If you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer. Oh, I'm sorry, yes, universal housing that's kind of what I'm talking about when I say fully accessible. So the ADA provides descriptions of things like that, so elevators and how high the button should be. We have light switches, we have Braille on door signs. All of those things are ADA accessible, and a lot of buildings don't have them, along with this wonderful councilwoman who gave her testimony, who talked about the living conditions in some of these apartments in Saginaw. It's not just there, it's all over, and it's very sad. What my agency does is we help find somewhere else for them to live, for them to stay, but that's not always possible, especially when you have a service animal or you use a wheelchair. Any questions?
No. Thank you so much.
Thank you guys.
Thank you.
Quincy Murphy.
Good evening. I am Quincy Murphy, the 3rd Ward City Councilman here for the City of Flint. And before I get into what I came here, I wanted to clear something up because my friend who I love so much dearly, Bethany, came up here and spoke about us as the City Councilman supporting ARPA fundings, and I know there are some people who disagree, but I heard her say that we supported a Halloween party for a church. That's not true. that's inaccurate, and I wanted to clear that up because I don't want to be sitting in the audience and hear false information being put out that we funded some things, and if you go and look at any resolution, we have not. Now, we got a councilman that does great work in the community that has supported Halloween things, and I think the two are getting mixed up, so that's inaccurate. Another thing that I wanted to bring to you guys' attention, I spoke here before I was elected to city council during the water crisis. And part of the problem of what you're hearing with some of the testimonies with the different residents is, for me, for instance, when I had to just change my hot water tank and I went and cut the pipe because I had old aging pipes, there was a lot of corrosion in the pipes within my home. When the water crisis hit Flint, over $600 million came to Flint, and as a result, no resident was able to get their house pipes replaced. So I think we missed the mark when we came and testified or they brought funding. They did not fund any funding to replace people's pipes. I just recently surprised my mother and replaced her sink in her bathroom, and the pipes, when we had to cut in the wall, the pipes was corroded. We got a lot of corrosion that's inside people's homes, and I don't care what you do on the outside, if you don't fix the pipes in the inside, we're gonna still hear this continuous problem with people not having to clean water in their home. But let me talk about the housing crisis, what I see as a policy issue in the city of Flint. When you look at the dynamics, you have a lot of policies, HUD programs, MISTA programs that is funding housing rehab. And when you look at the dynamics in the city of Flint, you got a lot of housing development going along around the corridor or of the downtown Flint area. And they say the housing is for affordable housing, but yet and still, when it comes down to owner-occupied homes, when you got people coming to city council and saying we need to add $16 million when we added $5 million, that's just not enough. We're not investing in owner-occupied rehabs in the city of Flint and Genesee County. We're not investing into owner-occupied buildings for affordable homes. And where I come from, and my motto is, poor folks can't afford to rent. So if I'm poor and I'm living paycheck to paycheck, we already dealing with redlining when it comes down to we paying the highest insurance rates when it comes down to renter's insurance, homeowner insurance, car insurance, then we gotta pay rent, then we gotta pay a car note, then we gotta buy food, then we gotta we gotta pay our water bill, then we gotta pay phone bill, then we gotta buy food. We paying all of these high economic costs with things, and it's just not helping the least of these. But then when you go to looking at all the development, and you don't have to take my word for it, when you leave here, ride down the city of Flint, you look at all of the development that you see in downtown. All of them are rental, 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 rental. And we are moving to a policy to where when you go and you asking the developers, well, why you can't do no owner occupied? They say, well, the policies are put in place that only help with investing in rental. So all you see in the city of Flint, majority of the housing development is rental, rental, rental. And poor folks can't afford to rent for the rest of their life. If they die, what do they leave to their kids? Nothing but the clothes on their back and the furniture in their house. And that don't work for us who have been struggling and who understand what discrimination is, who understand what gentrification looks like. And when you look at what's going on in the city of Flint, now all you see is development around affordable rental houses. And affordable is 900, 800. That's still not affordable. So I don't know what bracket they're using when it comes down to affordable, but still when they rent the houses, the amount of money that they paying, the least of these can't afford to rent these homes, so they still living paycheck to paycheck. I work at Lear. I see women, families working overtime to pay rent. I asked somebody last night, how much you pay rent? $900. They check ain't even $900, and then they gotta pay a car note. Then they gotta choose about medicine and all of this stuff right here. So we got some big issues going on that we need to address. We gave $5 million to owner occupied. 90 homes out of 1.5 that we gave to Metro Community Development only can do 90 homes. If we give 16 million, that's only 144 homes per ward. It's 81,000 people. We not investing enough money into owner-occupied homes, and it's almost like we disinvesting in our poor communities. We barely want to tear down houses. We barely want to fix up houses. So when the parents die and leave, they don't have nothing to give the kids because they don't want this house that we couldn't find no money to help. We giving $15,000 per household to help on an occupied rehab. That ain't enough. What can they do with that? We giving them crumbs, and we've been doing it for years. Over $1 billion done came in the city of Flint. As a result, you can't see nothing when it comes down to our urban community. We need to do better.
Thank you. Donna Allen?
Thank you. I'm up here because of the Flint water crisis. One of the things, well, the main thing that happened was my water bill was paid and the city turned it off. When they got a call to say it was paid, they came back to turn it on and they broke the water line. I haven't had service since. And today, I am still not in my house because the city broke my water line. During the water crisis, when they were installing new pipes, they came, they put in the pipes. I was able to go back to my home for about 5 months. They turned the water back off and sent a $4,700 water bill. And if I didn't pay it, which I did not, they turned the water off because of non-payment. And I am still not in my home. The water bill right now is up to $7,000. Because of this, my taxes on the house, because I had to move out, is $1,700. And I have till March 29th to pay it. Otherwise, I lose my house. I had put on a new roof before they broke the water line. My consumers is still on, which I am paying. My gas is still on. They have broken in my house because I can no longer live there. Because of a traffic accident, I can no longer bring my water into the house to try to have water. And it is sad that we have to go through this. I've had my cousins and stuff over. We do gardens, and I had raised garden beds. No longer can I use I did use my rainwater to try to water outside, but all of that is mute. I have to live somewhere else, go check my house out, and come back. And I am still homeless for years because of this. I have been down to the ombudsman office. I have been to the water department. All the documents keep stacking up to no resolve. So where I am, I have to get a handicap ramp there, and I have to try to get one at my house, so when I am able to pay the $1,700, not to lose my house by the end of this month, I can go back home and sleep in my bed after years. Do you have any questions? And there was a 0 water bill when they broke it. So it wasn't 200 or 500, it was no water bill. And they still will not turn on my water without having to pay $500 to $600 to pay, and I call it a fictitious bill. I have been down to the state of Michigan to ask for an SER, and they will pay $3,000 of it, and $3,000 of it has to come from somewhere else. But because I'm not living there and I have temporary housing, they are not doing it. So I am in a dilemma, and because of my car accident, I can't work and make as much money and all of this stuff. So I would appreciate if something can be done about having funds available for homeowners, funds available for handicap assistance, and to be in my home. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. We will be taking a 10-minute break after this next testimony. I'm calling Keyshawn Wade. And please correct me if I mispronounce your name.
Keyshawn. Hello, my name is Keyshawn Wade. I'm from Flint. I graduated from the last public high school in Flint, Flint Southwestern. I currently attend Cornell University, where I study urban and regional planning with a concentration in housing. I have a minor in inequality studies as well. And I chose my studies because of my experiences with housing. My family has been evicted, dealt with slumlords, been rent burdened, and through my studies, I know this is too common. Currently, my 72-year-old great aunt here in Flint lives in a basement apartment where it floods. She struggles to go up and down the stairs. She can't get any repairs. I think in the 12 years that she's lived there, it hasn't been changed in the slightest. No new carpet, no repairs, anything like that. And she continually faces rent increases. I think that is something that is inherently broken about a culture that permeates in our housing market today. Housing has become a commodity, and that is unacceptable. It's not a pair of trendy shoes. It's not a cool jacket. It's not a nice sports car. It's something that every human needs access to, and we're not treating it as such. The most vulnerable in our communities are feeling the burden of the commodification of housing. The rising costs of housing are not due to anything outside of greed and controllable market forces. In Flint, we just had 190 homes being sold to some obscure private investors while simultaneously giving tax breaks to large private entities that are coming to the city. And I think that is indicative of how we see housing for working class, middle class, the disappearing middle class, poor people. We see it as an extractive, parasitic relationship where they are giving their all to increase someone's investment portfolio. And I think that is something that this Civil Rights Commission should be focusing on is the use of class as discrimination. I know we've talked about race, we've talked about gender, we've talked about sex, but all of that intersects with class as well. And right now, there's an economic war being waged on the poor. Hundreds of people in Flint specifically are facing displacement due to this normalization of an extractive culture present in the housing fear. The most vulnerable are the ones who are most vulnerable to displacement, and that is people of color, people aged 25 years or older without a degree, renters, people at or below 80% median family income, and households with children living in poverty. I think just to raise up a few comments that have already been said and were excellent points, I think Ms. Baird's comment about the way that zoning included gross and discriminatory inclusion of anti-subsidized ordinance is exactly why we should have class be protected as well. Class should be a protected class. Otherwise, we will continue to be here decade after decade talking about the barriers that are going to continue to exist to housing. Housing is a social determinant of health, and we ought to treat it as such. We will continue to have families being displaced as price gouging is a necessity, as price gouging of a necessity. I want to say that the planning department in the city of Flint is complicit in a violent displacement of its residents. It is gentrification, it is wrong, it is evil, and we are suffering due to the sins of our past with the history of real estate being what it is, redlining, discrimination, block busting, corrupt price gouging, manufactured inflation, disinvestment, and deterioration. And just to put into context, according to the Flint Property Portal, 8,000 vacant or abandoned properties, and there are 8,000 or vacant properties in Flint, and the condition of Flint's housing inventory is that 13,000 properties have a condition of fair or worse. I implore you to seek out a course of action that protects the most vulnerable among us. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Keisha.
Thank you. So it is 5:33. We will reconvene at 5:45. Thank you.
You don't, you're not happy?
Yeah, no, this is just like very personal, out of scope, just like car insurance, calculation. I can actually just do all of that. No.
All right, we're going to get started in a second.
Do you want me to mention them while I enter these into the record? And then say, and additionally.
No, it's not. No, it's not on there. It's on the card that they use to say they want to testify.
Got it.
Yeah, when you get this at the very bottom.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, we're going to reconvene, please. All right, I would like to call Sheila Bishaha.
Hello, my name is Sheila. I'm from Flushing. I am profoundly deaf. And I do have, oh, I'm sorry about the microphone. Thank you. Can you hear me now? Okay. I lived in my apartment for 7 years in the Flushing area for senior citizens. And one time we had the alarm went off. It was a fire alarm. I could not hear the fire alarm. So I looked over the window and I saw this fire truck with the light flashing and realized there must be a fire going on. I had been talking to the manager of the apartment for the last 5 years about the acceptable that I need to be able to be aware of the alert system that has not been done until Wednesday that summer was done this year. I also have the problem with communication about the aspect of using the phone, which I can't hear the phone. I depend on lip reading. So we have to be very visual in order to communicate in body language, in hand sign language. I explained that to the manager of the apartment. We've had 4 different managers ever since I lived there. So the last manager we have, she seems to be a very wonderful person, but she is not aware of the issues that we need. I also have requests that the acceptable that we need for the deaf and hard of hearing is how are they going to hear the door back where we have the English time on the wall, and it's not visible with little light flashes. Anything that has a flash of light will help us to be aware that somebody is trying to reach us. I also think that by the ADA law, it should be received that the grandfather clock should be removed, no matter how old the building is, that they're acceptable of the needs that we have for people with less limitations. So I also have request when we had a fire alarm last year to request for a certified ASL sign language interpreter. They couldn't get one. Because when you're in a room, in a community room of 300 people, and everybody's talking all at the same time, raising their hands with questions, I'm feeling completely left out and isolated and not having a clue what they're saying. And I have the right to have an interpreter, but they couldn't get one because it was the last minute thing. So that's the whole key. I think the people who work for the subsidized apartment for senior citizens should be trained and to be educated and to teach them how to communicate with the deaf and hard of hearing. There are deaf people who don't know ASL that are speaking only. There are people who can't read lips. There are people who can't do very well in writing and reading. But when it comes to an application, they are having problems understanding it's because of the reading comprehension is so limited. I think it would be nice if you had a staff to train them to understand the need for us who are completely deaf and can't hear. And my concern is when somebody comes to ring the bus, I'm not hearing anything. And so the only way I had to tell them is to let me know what time you're gonna show up. So I think it's important that they should be educated and make the accessible more easy for the deaf and hard of hearing. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we do not have anyone else that has signed up to give testimony. If you still would like to give testimony, you would need to fill out a form. So is there anyone that would like to do so? Okay, thank you. Commissioner Orlando?
Madam Chair, I'd like to acknowledge written testimony that we received and have it entered into the record. So we received testimony from Amber Garrow, from Lanzetta Massey, and from Melvin Jones, Jr.
Thank you, Commissioner. The written testimony will be entered into the record.
Thank you.
Excuse me 1 minute. So at this time, we will end the public hearing, but written statements may still be submitted by email to mcrc-comments@michigan.gov. And the record will remain open until April 30th of 2024. If you would like that email address, it would be on the public comment cards that you can pick one up on your way out. The other thing that I would like to point out to all of you is there are items and concerns that have been mentioned that are not the purview of the Michigan Department of Civil Rights. But I wanted to make certain that you know where to get your help. So there is this form out in the registration table that states resources, so you can call or text 211, or if you have a smartphone, you can scan the QR code. There's also on this sheet the one-stop shop for state assistance resources, and it's a website, newmibridges.michigan.gov or newmibridges.michigan.gov. And please pick up one of these cards, which also gives the 211 information so that you can actually call them and get some assistance, or they can direct you to the location where you can actually get rental assistance, for example. I would like to thank all of you for coming out, for giving your testimony, and for listening. So we will be closing our testimony today a bit earlier, but I wanted to make certain that everyone that would like to testify has had an opportunity. So this is one more chance. Raise your hand, speak up. Yes, sir? So after your testimony, if you can please fill out the form so that we have a record. And
My
please
name's
state,
Rob-
I'm sorry.
My name's Robert Howard III.
Thank you.
I'm a combat veteran. I served in the Army and the Marine Corps. I was in the Desert Storm. I thought that everything that everyone was talking about up here was normal because I faced similar situations of discrimination and hardship and hard times and finding a place to stay. I suffer from PTSD, and there was a situation in an apartment that I lived in. The guy upstairs from me, he was a veteran, but he was receiving assistance. I wasn't. I was going to work every day and coming back, driving 35 miles each way, and the landlord talked to me real nasty like all the time. I had a good relation with his father, but when his father got sick and this guy took over, it was different. And it disheartens me that I put on a uniform twice to serve a country where you can allow people to be treated in such a way and it's ignored. Nobody's paying any attention to it. All of these people that have complained and said something about it, I think it should be looked into a little bit more. That's all I have.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
All right, so if there is no one else, I would like to conclude this testimony. Our next hearing will be on April 28th, beginning at 4 p.m. in Grand Rapids at the Center for Community Transformation. Please watch our website at michigan.gov/MDCR for Michigan Department of Civil Rights, and our social media for updates regarding the future housing hearings, the Civil Rights Summit, and our recommendations. Thank you for spending the evening here tonight and providing your experiences. And please have a safe return to wherever you're spending the night. Thank you. Oh, sorry. Oh, one more? Okay. Someone just squeaked in.
Last call, I came in at the right time.
Okay,
Good
so,
afternoon.
yes, we will hear from Frederick Q. Jones.
That's correct. Stepping in here late, I did not hear the comments of other persons who was before me. And I know that most of the information is just a rehash of what the people require and what their desires are. I myself, I just want to go ahead on and just to make sure that these meetings are not just, happenstance. We need feedback here in the community. So I know that you're being counted right now, from my standpoint, but yet still too, what is going to be done with the comments that have been made? I do understand that you are under a lot of pressure to get something done. Flint, just like many other places here in the state of Michigan, is in the state of duress. We are coming around slowly but surely, but housing, once again, is the basis for people to survive and thrive. Not everyone can move out to the suburbs where there's no transportation to get back and forth. So we have to be, should I say, diligent about where we are living and what the quality of life issues may or may not be. Now, I'm just shooting from the hip. This is not rehearsed or anything like that, but I just wanted to find out if and when, but I know that's hard to answer, that the community is going to have some type of answers and everything from the comments that have been made today. And I appreciate you allowing me to stand here, and I thank you so very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. So, since you just started here, one of the comments that I had at the very beginning is that the department will use this testimony to create a report of recommendations for addressing fair housing issues. The testimony gathered at these hearings will also influence the topics of discussion at the Civil Rights Summit, which we are having this June 12th in Detroit. Hang on. In order to get the best recommendations, we would like to hear personal testimony and personal experience on a variety of issues, which we have been having. One of the things that you should know is at the Civil Rights Summit, we are going to have resource tables with a lot of these other agencies that we do not have purview over, but a lot of the issues that were brought up are addressed by some of these other agencies. So I know it's in Detroit. However, like I said, if you would like additional assistance or help, to call 211, or there's a table out in the, as you came in, that has, hang on, resources as well. So they can help direct you to the appropriate place as well. Thank you. So one last call. Anyone? Great. Well, thank you all so much. We really appreciate you spending your Saturday afternoon. I'm sorry, my schedule's been crazy. Saturday afternoon here with us. So thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody.